What's up, guys, and welcome back to the YouTube channel. My name is Saman Habibi, your real estate agent for the Durham Region, realtor with Right At Home Realty here in Oshawa. And today I have a very special guest with me, Jacob Sofer. Jacob, thank you for joining us. And Jacob's from Metro Suites. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So Jacob, why don't we just jump right into it? Why don't you introduce yourself, your company, and what you guys provide?
Yeah, so we are a Terrion full-service builder. We build fully modular laneway and garden suites. Our primary focus is in the GTA, so Toronto particularly, but we are expanding to Durham and to the Hamilton area as the bylaws come into place.
Awesome. That's exciting. So the term garden suites has been thrown around a lot. As you mentioned, some municipalities have adopted this, some are in the works. So why don't we just go to the basics? What is a garden suite and why do people need them? Why does Canada or Ontario need it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so garden suites are a really interesting topic. They have been introduced recently in Ontario, but they've actually been around in different countries. So in Australia, California is a great example, as well as a few other states and Scandinavian countries. What they are essentially a second home that's fully detached from your main home. Mm-hmm. And they're used primarily for multi-generational purposes as well as for rental income.
Awesome. So I guess if we just talk about Ontario in general, so we know that there's a lot of talks about shortage of homes, immigration coming, population growing, and builders not being able to build at a pace to keep up with immigration and the population growth. And we know that recently there was a new bill introduced to kind of expedite this process of building homes. So how does garden suites kind of fit into helping those problems and solving some of those problems, whether it be as a principal residence or as an investment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's really interesting. The province seems to be looking for ways to increase housing. And one of those ways is to densify existing low-density areas. Mm-hmm. And so adding a garden suite to a property that has extra land is actually a very smart way of doing that. And so homeowners really now have that liberty and ability to develop land that would otherwise be idle. So it would otherwise be used for storage or for garage purposes. And so by giving homeowners this power, the idea in theory would be to increase housing supply at a pretty rapid pace.
Right. And that's something that's very much needed here. We see it everywhere. We see the shortage everywhere across the board. So that's awesome. So in terms of garden suites, so currently in the GTA or the greater GTA, where can you currently build? So where have the bylaws essentially passed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So Toronto is one of the first that have passed garden suites bylaws, Hamilton as well. There are actually other bylaws related to laneway suites, which we don't have to get into.
Yeah.
And so essentially the legislation is provincially focused. So other municipalities have slowly introduced these bylaws.
Yeah.
Just at a very high level.
Yeah.
Toronto, Hamilton, Mississauga is coming in 2023, as well as Markham and Richmond Hill. Barrie has bylaws in this respect. In Durham, Peterborough currently has bylaws. Clarington does. Oshawa is coming, 2023, 2024, as well as Pickering is coming in 2023, from what we hear and understand.
Awesome. That's sweet. And essentially one of the things that I read about Bill 23, which stood out to me and I saw as a huge benefit, and maybe you can comment on it if you're comfortable doing so, is that you don't necessarily need to go through any zoning changes on the property. One, and the second thing that stood out to me was also a pause on development charges on any properties. on any projects that would go through this bill. So do you have any comments on those 2 points?
Yeah, Bill 23 we're very, very excited about. I think I want to just backtrack and just go back to what a garden suite is before we talk on about Bill 23. So a garden suite is allows a homeowner to go directly for a building permit. So you mentioned the changes to zoning for Bill 23.
Yeah.
This adds already to that ability to not have to go through a minor variance for the second home and to go through a very quick process. Bill 23 would allow you to, if it's passed in its current form, allow you to build 3 suites on a single family home as of right. So just going for a building permit. And that's pretty significant.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Are there any other developments that you want to share in terms of, what's happening with municipalities, let's say Toronto, for example, wanting to increase density? Are they looking at legislation that would allow homeowners to take the building lot that they have and completely tear down and build something that's of higher density?
Yeah, it's a good point that you mentioned. We talked about this a little bit before the recording. The City Council is soon to be reviewing a proposal. It's called the Multiplex Proposal that proposes to allow any single family property owner to knock down their home or retrofit it as is and build up to a quadplex, as well as add, in its current form, allow a secondary suite. So potentially up to 4 or 5 units for a lot. And that's amazing, because if that passes, then you're going to start to see properties that have multiple cash flows above and beyond 3, which may ripple out into Durham and other regions.
Right. And essentially, the one thing that was interesting, you were saying that you may even be able to take this fourplex or whatever number of units you're able to sell and perhaps treat it as a condominium if you wanted to for valuation purposes or for resale purposes?
So we're just relying based off the proposal that has been made, that's being prepared. In that proposal, it states that you would be allowed to sell these units or to rent them out. Metro Suite is really watching this closely for the main purpose of creating a product in the future where we may have stackable pods for developers.
Nice.
So a product that would essentially allow a developer to build fairly quickly and fairly efficiently.
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like we've always missed that middle level construction of homes. We always have either the detached properties or the semis and the towns, or we have the high rises and really nothing in between. So it seems like this proposal would kind of marry those two different sides together and allow for a middle ground to take place, which would be very interesting. I think that would really provide a lot more housing and a lot more inventory to market, and perhaps change the market of real estate a little bit here.
Yeah, we're really in a crunch. I was reading the other day on the Financial Post that immigration has hit a record into Canada, and if you look at the dispersion of those immigrants, it's actually a fact, or it has been historically, that immigration will veer towards either Vancouver or BC area around Vancouver, or Toronto and GTA.
Right.
And so that has spill-on effects to Oshawa and the Durham region.
Yeah.
Rates have been super high. We've seen material costs be really high as well. And we've just seen the supply of housing actually collapse. So we've really set the stage for an interesting period in 2023 and beyond about housing prices, rental rates, and really there's going to be a big housing shortage that's going to be very difficult to acknowledge, to fix, and that may have roll-on effects onto pricing and rental rates that investors should pay attention to.
Absolutely. Awesome. So since we focus in on the Durham region, can you maybe comment about some of the projects that you guys are working on this side of the GTA, and if you're seeing more demand in certain areas over the others?
Well, I can speak of aggregate demand. There's almost a craze for garden suites, and it's interesting how it hasn't been as much affected by rates as, say, other parts of the real estate market. Initially in February of 2022, we saw that builds were focused in large part towards investors, so investors dominated that market. But since rates have changed, the focus has been largely on multi-generational situations. So if you imagine a situation where adult children can't find housing on their own, or children come back from college or university and they can't afford rents, or, and most specifically, folks who are looking from a retirement planning strategy to actually move into the garden suite and rent out the main home.
Interesting,
These situations are extremely common, and it's just a really wonderful way to address this issue of housing. Just on the former part of your question, we are in discussions with quite a few homeowners. We actually have about 17 project proposals out right now.
Awesome.
And our most recent project in the Durham area, in Peterborough specifically, is with a federal charity, I believe is Canadian Mental Health Association. So we are actually building housing for them for temporary mental health patient housing to help with the community. So this should be in February, March, April for delivery. So that's we'll keep you posted on that.
That's awesome. And out of the 17 proposals you guys have, would you say most of them are homeowners, or are they, or is there a split between homeowners and investors?
I would say most of them are homeowners at this point. Investors have taken a sort of sidelined approach to see where rates go. I personally believe that we'll start to see rates stabilize into Q1 and Q2 of 2023. And at that point, with more confidence, I think investors will start to slowly come back on board.
Nice. Okay, so so we've talked about what garden suites are and why they're important. In terms of investors looking at properties that they have, essentially they want to identify whether their property or their building lot is able to accommodate a garden suite. So if you're an investor, what are some things that you should be looking out for? What are some preliminary due diligence steps that you should be taking to see if your property would meet the requirements for a garden suite?
So I'll answer specifically to the Durham region. Clarington, as a great example, is very relaxed with their setbacks vis-a-vis, say, Toronto. So the setbacks for Clarington are 1.8 meters. I don't believe there's a minimum distance between the two dwellings, as well as certain caps on the total ancillary structure square footage on the property and certain other items. So when investors are looking for properties that might have this eligibility of a garden suite, or looking within their portfolio, which is more common, they should look for properties with large open spaces. So think a patch of grass in the backyard or on the side yard as well. And it would be strong to consider trees as a way of impacting a project, especially in Toronto.
I see. So if you've got, let's say, a big, sorry, you said in Toronto, right? And maybe in the Durham region it's a bit more lax when it comes to trees?
I think so. Well, we were discussing this before. I believe so. They're more relaxed.
Okay. Okay. Cool. And then, what about in terms of? Would you have any information on zoning or like minimum lot size that people should be focused on or considering?
I think the biggest item for let's just say Clarington, because they have in place bylaws, is the percentage to gross floor area. So there's a cap on the amount of space that you can build compared to the main dwelling. And this cap is, in Clarington at least, the same or less as the main home. And that's a great barometer for how much you can build. You should consider as well the side yard setbacks as well as the rear yard setbacks. And any any trees that might be in the way. I mentioned that.
Yeah.
In Hamilton, as an example, there's an issue that certainly should be considered. There's the Niagara Escarpment Commission, which would require an additional development permit.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any of these similar traits in Durham, but that's something that investors should investigate.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think in the Durham region we have the CLOCA, the Central Lake Ontario Conservation Authority. And investors are able to go on CLOCA's website and identify if their house is on a CLOCA regulated land. And any time that there is, we encourage them to call CLOCA and kind of investigate as to what they want to do, and they'll give you a yes or no answer right away. So I think that's the closest thing to we have. Okay, cool. Good stuff. So just as an example, I wanted to show our viewers two type of properties, one being a corner unit and one being a middle unit house, and I was hoping you can just take a look at these properties and just kind of comment on what you're seeing. So if someone had this property and wanted to kind of determine if they can add a garden suite, I was hoping you can just take a look at it and just give us your train of thought as to what you're thinking, what you're seeing, what you're thinking, and so on. So maybe I'll share the picture with our audience and they'll be able to see as you talk about these properties.
Okay, so they'll be able to see the mouse move?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so for this first property, and this is a great property, it's a corner lot, which is really interesting because say you put a garden suite where this supposed garage is, that would allow you to have a quasi-neighbor relationship. So meaning you have a garden suite here and the entrance is right onto Floral Drive. So you now have this home that essentially has a neighbor that can walk directly onto the street versus say this home, which is most homes, and this is totally okay as well, that would have to enter from the side. So that's really interesting, and just from a blanket view, this looks like it would qualify for a garden suite given the space.
Awesome. And then what if, let's say we have a property where property is a middle unit, there's a laneway that takes you, that's a driveway and takes you to the backyard. So what should people be looking for if they have a middle unit property? Okay.
So these are most properties that we look at. So I would say two biggest items are life safety access. So that's defined by this width. So the distance of the side yard, the side wall of the main dwelling to the side property line, that I think has to be 1 or 1.5 meters to allow fire safety to get to the back in case there's a fire. As well as the actual distance from the front of the property line to the entrance of the secondary suite. In Peterborough and in Toronto and Clarington, I believe it's about 45 meters. If either of these items aren't correct or the property isn't compliant in this respect, it's very difficult in our experience to get the city to be more lenient because this is a safety of lives.
Right.
So these are the first two things that we look at. Other than that, the property has a really big backyard with 1 or maybe 2 trees, 3 trees in the back, and it looks really ideal for a garden suite.
Okay, so essentially, what you're saying is that from the property line to the entrance of the garden suite needs to have a minimum 45 meter. Maximum 45 meter.
Yes,
yeah.
And this totally depends on the municipality. It may change from city to city, but just at a view, this actually, it does qualify because of this number right here. 132 feet, I'm guessing, is the total distance from this point to this point. Correct. So that's under 45 meters.
Yes.
So, so as a final item, a property that, say, right here is 45 meters from this point to this point, that doesn't affect the amount of build space you can have. It just affects where the property can start at, where the house can start at, the secondary suite.
Right. Okay. Awesome. Good to know. Perfect. So, okay. So let's say now you have a property that has the ability to take on a garden suite. What are some options that you guys provide in terms of these? And sorry, maybe we should mention to our audience that you guys build these prefab, so they're built and they come on site. So can you perhaps just talk about that process? Yeah.
Yeah. So Metro Suite is a Terrion builder. We offer a fully turnkey service. And all of our homes are built off-site in a factory. So what that means is, we take care of everything from the building permit stage, design, all of the site work, so any trenching, utility connections, foundation work that's required, as well as the home, which is fully built and delivered to the site with appliances fully built. And then it's actually craned over the main house, kind of like a fiberglass pool, onto the foundation that we would have prepared for it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And can you talk about the three different type of plans, I guess you guys have?
Yeah. So we have about 5 different floor plans, 3 for garden suites and 2 for laneway suites, which are just different bylaws. We won't get into it.
Yeah.
We have a 350 or so square foot studio, 1 story, a 1 bedroom, 500 square foot, 1 story, 1 bedroom, 500 square foot, and then a 600 or so square foot 2 bedroom, all 1 stories for a garden suite.
Yes.
We do have the ability to make a 2 story, however, 1 stories units have been very, very, very popular, so that's why we focus in that direction.
Awesome. And in terms of, and you mentioned that you guys take this process from start to finish. So planning, permits, trenching, landscaping as well? Yeah,
landscaping. And just to add on, our process is really, really fast. So because we can do the home building effort alongside the site work, we can actually accomplish a project in as little as 16 weeks vis-a-vis a traditional construction, which could take over 12 months.
Yeah.
For owner-occupiers, they really love this. We only require about 3 to 6 weeks of actually being on the property to do the site work versus traditional construction, which could, won't get into it, but the horror stories can be crazy. So.
Yeah, actually, I have a client in Clarington who is doing this right now.
Yeah.
And so they took the single-family house, they put in a legal accessory apartment, and then they're also doing a garden suite. So they decided to work on the main house, which is done, ready to be tenanted, but the problem is there's no parking space because the construction company essentially needs to access the front yard, the side yard, the backyard to do it. So from a construction difficulty perspective, the tenants now don't have parking spot and have to find somewhere to park. So we're the owners knocking on neighbors' doors and asking if his tenants can park. But anyways, so you said that you guys can take a project from start to finish within 16 weeks, you said?
As little as 16
weeks. As little
weeks.
as 16 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's after the permit are obtained?
That's including the permit process. Now that's totally dependent on the time that we get a response from the planning department.
Yeah.
In Toronto, they're seemingly very, very quick. We've also had great experience so far in Peterborough and Clarington. We hear good news from.
Yeah.
So totally depends on the planning department.
How quick? When you say quick,
we're hearing really great feedback from the city on laneway suites.
Yeah.
About 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. For Toronto specifically, it's very prescriptive because they see a lot of volume.
Right.
I don't believe any garden suites in Toronto have been built as of right now because the bylaws were just passed in the summer, so we're basing it off of the laneway program.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. All right, so we've talked about timelines. So what about costs? What are we dealing with cost?
Right. So costs can range vastly. We would encourage investors and homeowners to submit a form with their property address, and then we would be able to give a specific cost.
Yeah.
But it ranges anywhere from $250,000 to 350, 400,000, depending on the home.
Right.
I would add that this is a fixed cost.
Mm-hmm.
So unlike estimates that are provided from design builders, we don't deviate from the cost that we contractually sign right at the beginning.
That's awesome. Yeah.
It's actually, another thought came to mind. For investors, it's really interesting because say you have this Excel sheet, this financial model. You now know with certainty that you can take this number and put it in this cell and then work backwards from there and see how creative it can be.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, especially in a market where, having dealt with contractors myself on conversions, you're always getting that conversation of material costs have gone up. I can't find it. I have to drive elsewhere to pick up material. So I think it's a very comforting point to hear that it's fixed costs. And to your point, estimates are kind of out of the window over here. So it's giving you a lot of certainty over your budgeting, I guess, that you're working on. So that's awesome. Okay, and then in terms of what about financing options? Are you able to comment on what people are doing for financing? Are people paying cash? Line of credits, partnering up with people? What's your experience? What have you heard from people?
So we're in a really interesting environment. Folks who have a mortgage that is 1-2% from 4 or 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, are not wanting to refinance those mortgages at higher rates. So the first step that they take and that we would recommend is to see if you can apply for a HELOC. Yeah. And most folks have been able to for the amount of the cost because of the lift that we've seen over the past few years during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So a HELOC is first from a Schedule A bank.
Yeah.
The second would be a B lender. Interestingly, as I mentioned, having a low rate mortgage and then pairing that with a B lender situation, a mortgage situation, the blended rate may actually be lesser than the refinancing of the mortgage. So folks are looking at in that area as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good stuff. And then I guess lastly, I wanted to ask you about valuation on these on garden, so properties that have garden suites. So it might be hard to kind of know valuation for the GTA because it's very new, but have you done some research to see what happens to the value of properties in other countries, let's say like in the US and Seattle, California? Is there a big value lift on properties that have garden suites?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm hesitant to offer any financial advice, so this isn't financial advice.
Yep.
I can say factually what we've seen in California, which has garden suite bylaws that have been around for about 5 years, as well as Portland and now Washington. We've seen investors value properties with garden suites based off cash flow, which is really interesting. So you take a typical family home. Typically, before this, it was valued based off comps. Correct. So what is the next door being valued at? Yeah. What we're seeing there, and my personal belief, is that we'll start to see homes that are based off of the 3 cash flows. So an investor would look at a property down the street and say, okay, this property we think can generate this value based off cash flows. This is what we're going to apply a cap rate based off of. Yeah. So it's being, in California at least, and for laneways at least what we've seen, properties have been valued based on the cap rate method, the income-based approach.
Do you know if that's also true in Toronto with laneway homes?
That's what we've seen rate hiking cycle. Yeah. Obviously things have changed. Yeah. My personal opinion is that when things stabilize from a rate perspective, we'll start to see the development potential. So let's say you own a single family home like the 2 properties that you showed. Yeah. Even if you, and this is my opinion, even if you hadn't built a garden suite yet, it may be priced based off its potential.
Correct. Yeah.
So it could be. You're the realtor, so
Yeah.
I'd look to you for guidance. But
Yeah, I was going to comment the same. I was going to say, well, yeah, of course we have the comparable and income approach, and everyone's familiar with the comparable approach. But on the income approach, that's what a lot of investors have been looking as a safety point right now, and essentially kind of changing their mentality on what to purchase. So if there's risk in valuation purposes and financing purposes, it's better to buy a property that is classified and is valued on an income approach, typically a property that's 5 units or more or qualifies for commercial lending versus a residential property that goes through the regular comparable approach. And it's kind of, looking at what land sells for in the GTA and the Durham region when developers are purchasing. So developers are not necessarily purchasing for the value today. They're kind of, the owners are advertising and saying that, look, there's a development opportunity here and you can achieve X as a result. I'm not selling it to you based off a comparable approach. I'm selling it to you based on what the value of the land is worth, which is a lot because, we look at developers who purchase 2-3 lands together and then go up into the sky. You can achieve a lot of units. So there's a lot of meat on the bone. Depending on what happens with development charges and building charges. But yeah, to your point, it's I can see that happening as well, where land is now being valued more because of the potential that it can provide to the end user.
Yeah, I'd just like to finish off and say that because these are built post November 15, 2018, and you'll have to, your audience and yourself will have to verify this, fact check this. It may not be subject to rental cap rates on an annual basis. So a new garden suite build, you may be able to increase the rent on an annual basis by what the market would allow you to do.
Yeah, I was just recently looking at a standard lease form, and it's explicitly there as a new item, a new development that does not meet the guidelines for rental increases. The only portion that another aspect to this would of course be HST on the new build that I don't really have clarity on, but I would say that would be another thing for people to consider is. If you build a garden suite, is there HST on it or not? I'm not sure.
There is.
Yeah.
There is. But there may be federal HST rebate programs that I would encourage your investor audience to review with their tax professionals. Because we've actually factually heard laneway suite homeowners who have gotten HST rebates back. Up to $24,000 back, which is quite a lot. I
guess that's the same as a new build.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, maybe it's treated the same. Yeah. Awesome. Perfect, Jacob. Thanks for joining us on the show. And if anyone wanted to connect with you, what would be the best way for people to get in contact with you?
They would just go to www.metrosuite.ca. If they wanted their property to be reviewed, they would submit the form that would be on the top right corner.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. Hopefully, maybe in the future months and in the new year, if you have a project that you take to the finish line, maybe we can stop by, check it out, and reference this video and say, hey, we talked about it, and now
no, that's coming.
Finished product.
You should come to the Peterborough project. That'll be the next one.
Absolutely. Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you have any questions about garden suites and what that process looks like, you can always contact Jacob through their website, or if you'd like, you can drop a comment in the comment section below, and either I can answer it or I can reach out to Jacob for answers. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you next week.